My history teacher spent 23 years accusing students of cheating without a shred of proof, so I let her do it one last time to the wrong kid. Mrs. Halpern had a hobby, and that hobby was accusing teenagers of cheating. Not the occasional caught in the act kind, the hunch kind. A grade that jumped half a letter would put you on her list. Finish a test 5 minutes early and she'd circle your desk for the rest of the period. Two students using the same example in an essay meant to sit down to decide which of you had copied. The yellow legal pad in her top drawer held names, dates, and what she liked to call patterns. She'd been keeping it for 23 years. The older kids called her room the courthouse. In my freshman year alone, 6 students were accused and 6 were cleared. None of it slowed her down. Haruto, the principal, a soft man 2 years from retirement, once told an accused student's mother in the hallway, in front of me, that Mrs. Halpern was set in her ways, and it was easier to ride out than to file anything formal. By junior year, the AP class had figured out that looking up during a test was the same as confessing, which only made her more suspicious. I know one of you is doing it, she'd announced mid-period, with a small smile. I just haven't caught you yet. That smile said everything. She came for me in October. A summer of tutoring had pushed my grade from a B to an A-, and the first test of the term came back a 97. After class, she pulled me aside. You had help. I'd like to know what kind. When my mother asked about it at conferences a month later, Mrs. Halpern said the same thing she said to every parent. Some kids have to learn that shortcuts have a cost. My mother walked out shaking and went straight to Haruto. He told her Halpern was retiring in 2 years and not to make a thing of it. On the drive home, my mother said, just keep your head down. She'll find someone else to chase soon enough. I'd been keeping my head down for 2 years. What broke me happened in March, and it didn't happen to me. A junior named Ezra sat in the back corner of our class and almost never spoke. He had a 4.0, ate lunch in the library, and had once helped me with a homework problem so quietly that I didn't realize he'd done it until the next day. His mother had died of cancer 2 years before, which the whole school knew because we'd held a moment of silence for her. His father was on the school board, but Ezra never mentioned it, and most teachers never put the names together because Ezra was a polar opposite of his dad. In March, he turned in a paper using a word Mrs. Halpern decided no high schooler should know. She called him out in front of the class, made him read the sentence aloud, told him she'd be turning the paper in for formal review, and that boys like him needed to learn the rules. Ezra sat down without a word and stared at his desk for the rest of the period. After class, I found him in the stairwell trying not to cry. He'd spent 4 months on that paper. It was the first thing he'd written since his mother died, and he had written it about her. 2 weeks later, the accusation was dismissed for lack of evidence. Mrs. Halpern never apologized. I stand by my instincts, she told the class. That was the night I started planning. I didn't need much. The teacher did almost all the work herself. Her pattern was something the whole school could have drawn on a napkin. She'd get suspicious a week before a big test, watch the suspect during the test, and pounce the moment they did anything she could call a tell. She accused first and checked nothing. 3 days before our unit final, worth 20% of the semester, I told a friend in the hallway, loud enough to carry through Mrs. Halpern's open door, that I wouldn't be surprised if somebody in our class tried to cheat on a test this big. No name, no detail, just the idea, placed where she'd pick it up. She spent the next 3 days drifting to the back of the room every class, watching the kids who had scored highest on the previous test. Ezra was at the top of her list because Ezra was always at the top of her list. On the morning of the final, I sat 2 rows behind him and watched her circle his desk every 5 minutes for the whole period. He finished 20 minutes early, the way he always did, and let his eyes drift toward the window. That was all she needed. She walked straight to him, lifted the paper out from under his hands, and announced, loud enough for the next classroom, that she had caught him cheating and that he could spend the rest of the period in Haruto's office. Ezra got up and walked out without arguing. Let this be a lesson, she said to the rest of us. His father was in Haruto's office within the hour. School board members don't have to raise their voices. He pulled every accusation Mrs. Halpern had filed in 23 years and brought the file to the next board meeting. The 2 days between the accusation and the board meeting were the loudest I had ever heard our school get about something that wasn't a football game. Kids who had been in Mrs. Halpern's class 3, 4, 5 years ago were texting each other like old war buddies finding out their general just got arrested. A senior who had graduated 2 years before messaged our friend group out of nowhere. She accused me of copying off a kid I'd never even spoken to. I had to retake the test in Haruto's office while my parents watched. I hope they finally do something. At lunch, I went to the library to find Ezra. He was sitting with his hands flat on the table, staring at nothing, like someone had pressed pause on him. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. Are you okay? I asked, which felt like the dumbest question in the world the second it left my mouth. He didn't look up right away. When he did, his face was calm but empty. My dad pulled the file, he said. There are 47 names in 23 years, 47 kids she accused. He paused. You know how many were actually caught cheating? I shook my head even though I already knew. 0, he said. Not a single one had evidence against them. 47. I sat there and let that number settle into me like a rock sinking into water. 47 kids who sat where Ezra sat, who got pulled aside, who got called out, who had their papers lifted off their desks, or their parents called in, or their records flagged. I was one of them. Ezra was one of them. And every single time, the school looked the other way and let Mrs. Halpern reload. I looked at Ezra across the table and he was waiting for me to say something. I didn't know what to say. I had been carrying my own version of that number for a year, just smaller and quieter, and I had never said it out loud either. What's your dad going to do? I asked. Ezra leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since I sat down, something that looked almost like anger crossed his face. Not the loud kind, the kind that sits still and waits. He's bringing it to the board meeting on Thursday, he said. He told me he's not asking for an apology. He's asking them to explain why nobody stopped her. That evening my phone rang and it was Pilar, my mom. She didn't even say hello. I heard about the file, she said. Another parent told me at the store. 47 accusations. 47. I sat on my bed and listened. I went to Haruto 2 years ago, she said, and I could hear her pacing the way she does when she's worked up, opening cabinets and closing them without taking anything out. I went to him and I told him what that woman said to you, and he looked me in the face and told me not to make a thing of it. Now 47 families find out he knew. I waited for the anger to come, the kind she had on the drive home from that conference, the tight jaw and the white knuckles, but it didn't come. Instead, I heard something I had never heard in her voice before. It took me a second to place it. It was relief. Pure, tired relief. Like she had been carrying a bag of rocks up a hill for 2 years, and someone had finally told her she could put it down. Someone was finally doing something. Not a parent being told to keep quiet. Not a kid being told to keep their head down. An actual school board member with an actual file walking into an actual meeting and saying, "Explain this." I thought about her sitting across from Haruto 2 years ago, with her hands folded in her lap, trying to keep her voice even, and being told to wait it out. She had carried that conversation home with her for 2 years. Now she could finally set it down. That night I was lying on my bed when my phone buzzed. It was Newton, my best friend since freshman year. I heard Mrs. Halpern went to Haruto today and told him she wants to speak at the board meeting. She wants to present her case. I sat up. What did Haruto say? Newton made this sound, half laugh and half sigh. He told her she could have 5 minutes. He looked like he was going to be sick. I closed my eyes. Mrs. Halpern had actually asked to stand up in front of the school board with her yellow legal pad and make her argument. And Haruto, because Haruto had never once said no to anything that might cause a scene, gave her the time. I felt something rush through me, warm and fast. It was close to victory, because this was better than what I wanted. Mrs. Halpern was going to get up there and do the work for us. She was going to hold up that legal pad like a trophy and read her entries out loud, and every person in that room was going to hear what I had heard for 3 years. A teacher who saw cheating in every direction she looked and never once found any. She was going to prove our case better than Franklin ever could, and she was going to do it thinking she was defending herself. I almost smiled. And then Newton said, real quiet, "Ezra knows, by the way." Everything in me went tight. "Knows what?" I said. "He knows you said that thing in the hallway before the test," Newton said. "He figured it out. He asked me if you did it on purpose." The room felt like it tilted. "What did you tell him?" I asked. Newton was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I told him you'd have to answer that yourself." I sat there in my room holding my phone and feeling like the floor had just shifted under me. I had spent weeks on this. I had thought about all of it except this. Ezra figured it out. Of course he figured it out. He had a 4.0 and he noticed things nobody else noticed. And he had been the one sitting in that chair when Mrs. Halpern lifted the test out from under his hands. I had used him. I had looked at Ezra, a kid who lost his mom and sat in a stairwell trying not to cry after a teacher tore apart the first thing he wrote about her, and I had seen an opportunity. I told myself it was for him. I told myself it was for all 47 of them, but I never asked him if he wanted to be part of it. I just decided for him, the same way Mrs. Halpern decided for every kid whose name went into that legal pad. I picked up my phone and called Ezra. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. I sat there staring at his name on my screen and I wanted to text him, wanted to type out some explanation that would make it make sense, but every sentence I started in my head sounded like an excuse, because it was an excuse. I put my phone face down on the bed and stared at the ceiling and felt the size of what I had set in motion. It was bigger than me now. It was bigger than all of us. The morning of the board meeting, I found Ezra at his locker before first period. He was just standing there, putting a textbook away, moving slow. When he saw me coming, he didn't walk away, but he didn't look at me either. "I need to talk to you," I said. He still didn't look at me. "Then talk," he said. His voice wasn't mean. It wasn't cold. It was flat. I told him. All of it. I told him I stood in the hallway outside Mrs. Halpern's room 3 days before the final and said something about cheating, loud enough for her to hear through her open door. I told him I did it on purpose. I told him I knew she would spend the next 3 days watching the highest scorers, and I knew he would be at the top of that list. I told him I knew he would finish early the way he always did, and I knew he would look away from his paper the way he always did, and I knew Mrs. Halpern would see exactly what she wanted to see. "I knew your dad would do something about it," I said. "I knew he had the power to do what nobody else would." Ezra closed his locker, not hard, the metal clicking shut. He stood there with his hand still on the door. "So you set me up," he said. The words came out simple and clear. "I set her up," I said, and I heard how fast it came out, how ready I was with it. "You were never going to get in real trouble. Your record is perfect. Your dad is on the board." Ezra shook his head, slow. The kind of head shake that says you missed the point so completely the person doesn't even know where to begin correcting you. "You don't get it," he said, and now he was looking at me, really looking, and I wished he wasn't because his eyes were the same ones I had seen in that stairwell in March. That paper she took from me in March, the one about my mom, his jaw tightened. I almost quit school over that. I sat in my room for 2 weeks and I couldn't write, I couldn't study, I couldn't do anything because every time I opened a book I saw her standing over my desk, telling me that boys like me needed to learn the rules. About a paper I wrote about my mom. He took a breath. "And you looked at me in that stairwell. You saw how wrecked I was, and then you used me anyway." I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Not because I didn't have words. I had a whole speech in my head about how this was bigger than one test. How 47 kids deserved somebody to finally do something. How the system was broken and nobody with any power was ever going to fix it unless somebody forced their hand. I had all of it ready to go. But standing in front of Ezra in that hallway, with the first period bell about to ring and kids streaming past us on both sides, none of it sounded like the truth. The truth was that I knew it would hurt him. I knew it the night I started planning, and I knew it the morning of the final when I sat 2 rows behind him, and I knew it when she walked up and took his paper. I knew all of that, and I told myself the result would be worth it. Standing in front of him now, watching his face, I was not sure. Ezra adjusted his bag on his shoulder. "My dad is still going to the meeting tonight," he said. "That part I'm glad about." He looked back at me one more time. "But you should have told me. You should have asked." Then he walked down the hallway toward first period. He didn't look back. I stood there with my bag hanging off one shoulder, and kids moving around me like water around a rock, and I watched him go, and I knew he was right. He was completely, totally right. I should have told him. I should have sat down across from him in that library where he ate lunch every day, and given him the thing Mrs. Halpern never gave any of us, a choice. At lunch, I texted Pilar. "I need to go to the board meeting tonight." She texted back fast. "Why?" I stared at my phone. I thought about lying, but I was so tired of being clever, so I typed the truth. "Because I started this. I should be there when it ends." Pilar picked me up at 6. The board meeting was in the cafeteria. They had set up rows of folding chairs facing a long table where the board members sat, and the room smelled like floor cleaner and old lunch trays. Pilar and I found seats near the back. I could see Franklin in the front row, wearing a suit I had never seen him in before, sitting straight with a manila folder on his lap. Haruto was at the long table with the other board members, adjusting his tie every 30 seconds like it was choking him. And on the far side of the room, sitting alone with an empty chair on either side of her, was Mrs. Halpern. The yellow legal pad was in her hands. Parents I didn't recognize kept filing in behind us. A father in a flannel shirt who looked like he had come straight from work. A mother holding a coffee cup like she needed something to do with her hands. The cafeteria filled up the way it never did during school. Franklin Franklin spoke first. He stood up and he was calm, totally calm, the kind of calm that makes a room go quiet on its own. He opened the manila folder and said, "In 23 years, Mrs. Halpern has filed 47 formal or informal accusations of academic dishonesty. I have the documentation for everyone. Not a single accusation resulted in a confirmed case of cheating. Every student was cleared." He let that hang there. Nobody moved. My son was the 47th. Then he started reading names, 5 of them, with dates. The first was a freshman who transferred schools after being accused. The second was a senior who lost an early admission offer because the accusation held up her transcript for weeks. The third was a kid who stopped taking advanced classes after that, just dropped down to regular level and never came back. For each one, Franklin said where they ended up, what it cost them. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the vending machines in the hallway. Next to me, Pilar gripped the armrest of her folding chair so hard her knuckles went white. I put my hand on top of hers, but she didn't let go. Haruto tried to jump in. "We've always taken teacher concerns seriously and followed up appropriately," he said, and his voice cracked a little on the last word. Franklin looked right at him. "You told my son's classmate's mother in a school hallway that it was easier to write out Mrs. Halpern's behavior than to file anything formal. Is that what appropriate follow-up looks like to this board?" Haruto didn't answer. He looked down at the table. Then they gave Mrs. Halpern her 5 minutes. She stood up and held the yellow legal pad in the air like it was a diploma. "This is 23 years of observation," she said. "I have tracked patterns. I have documented every case where a student's performance did not match their history. This is not guesswork. This is professional diligence." She opened the pad and started reading. October 4 years ago. Student's essay contained a reference to a source not on the reading list. Flagged for review. She turned the page. February 6 years ago. 2 students turned in papers with similar thesis structures. Flagged. She kept going. A student who improved after getting a tutor. 2 kids who used the same example from the textbook. A student who finished a test early. Entry after entry. And every single one was just suspicion with a date on it. She read for about 3 minutes and the whole time she sounded proud, like she was showing the board her life's work. And she didn't seem to notice that every entry was doing exactly what Franklin's file had already done. A board member finally cut in. "Mrs. Halpern, in any of these cases, did you find concrete evidence of cheating? A copied paper? A cheat sheet? A confession?" Mrs. Halpern stopped. She looked at the board member and there was a pause. A real pause. The kind where you can feel the whole room holding its breath. Then she said, "The absence of evidence does not mean the absence of cheating. My instincts have never failed me." The board member didn't blink. "Your instincts have failed 47 students." Mrs. Halpern looked out at the room then, really looked for the first time at all the faces staring back at her. And I saw something move behind her eyes. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. It was confusion. Pure, honest confusion. Like a person who had been speaking a language their whole life and just found out nobody else understood a word of it. She sat down slowly, holding the legal pad against her chest like a shield. The board voted to place her on immediate administrative leave pending a full review of her conduct. They told Haruto to provide a written account of every parent complaint he had ever received about her. The whole meeting was over in under an hour. As people started filing toward the doors, I saw Ezra by the exit. Franklin was next to him with his hand on Ezra's shoulder. Ezra saw me across the room and held my gaze for a long moment. He didn't smile, but he nodded. Once, small. It wasn't forgiveness. It was him saying, "I see you, and I know what you did. All of it." I nodded back, and then Pilar touched my arm, and we walked out into the parking lot where the air was cool and smelled like cut grass, and I could finally breathe again. On the drive home, Pilar was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You knew this would happen. When you told me about Ezra in March, you already had a plan, didn't you?" I didn't lie to her. "Yeah, I did." Pilar nodded slowly. "I spent 2 years telling you to keep your head down, and you didn't listen." She paused. "Good." We drove the rest of the way without talking. The streetlights moved across the windshield in slow, even stripes, and Pilar's hands on the wheel were the most relaxed I had seen them in 2 years. Mrs. Halpern never returned to the classroom. The review found a pattern of unsubstantiated accusations spanning her entire career. She was offered early retirement and took it. Haruto retired at the end of that school year, 1 year ahead of schedule. The school board issued a brief written statement at the end of the month. It contained 3 sentences and named no individuals. 47 former students were notified by letter that their records had been reviewed and that no findings of academic dishonesty remained on file. The letter was signed by the interim principal, brought in from the district office to finish out the year. The cafeteria where the meeting had been held went back to serving lunch the next morning. The board minutes were filed in the district archive. The yellow legal pad was not returned. The school year ended on the 3rd Friday in June.